Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Regine Show. It is Monday afternoon, 2 p.m., and you are listening to KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, and hometownstation.com. I am Dr. Regine, taking over the Teen Hour. I am a psychologist, children's author, and mental health advocate in the Los Angeles area. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Ish Major. To tell you a little bit about him, Dr. Ish is one of America's top psychiatrists, author, and dating expert. As an on-camera expert, Dr. Ish is the co-host of WeTV's hit series Marriage and Family Boot Camp Reality Stars. He's appeared with the likes of Kourtney Kardashian, Carrie Fisher, and many others, and he has also been featured in People, O Magazine, Cosmo, USA Today, and Match.com. Welcome, Dr. Ish, to the show.
Hey, Doc, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on such an important topic, and I would love to dive right in so you could tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure. Yes, I am a board-certified psychiatrist. I specialize in women, children, and families, and also substance use as well. So that we kind of cover the gamut. Most things family-related, which are all things relationship-related, and trying to help that unit feel better and trying to help those individuals in that unit and that dynamic feel better. I work with and I cover, and I enjoy it. You know, I grew up with 5 sisters and 8 aunts, and my mom and dad were together for 56 years. So I was the little kid in the room being privy to some of those private conversations between all women. So I feel like I got a little extra leg up and a little extra insight when it comes to the relationship stuff. And I try to share, some of that with my patients, my clients, and some of my viewers. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
Oh, that's really great. Tell us a little bit about your show that you host, and what do you see a lot? And I'm sure there's a lot of interesting information there.
Yeah, there's a lot of drama, that's for sure. That's what I do most of. So the show is Marriage Boot Camp. And we do a few different iterations. We take all your favorite housewives, all your favorite teen moms, all your favorite love and hip-hop stars, and we bring them out to L.A. and we do a relationship boot camp. We try to revamp their relationship and give them the skills to help them do it just a little bit better, or in some cases, not at all, right? Because just because you're in one doesn't mean you're supposed to stay in one. Sometimes a healthier choice is to know when to walk away. So we see a lot of communication issues, a lot of ego issues, a lot of narcissism because we're dealing with celebrities, right? And it is a narcissistic heavy field. So breaking a lot of that apart, it takes work, and it's delicate sometimes. It really is.
Yeah. So before I go into, asking you what's a healthy relationship from just your experience, I'm really curious also, based on your experience on the show too, what are some, and also as a practitioner, what are some of the most high conflictual things you've seen that really break relationships apart that you feel that you've seen?
Yeah. I think some of the biggest areas of conflict are, obviously infidelity. When somebody cheats, that's a problem. When you're doing a blended family, we see a lot of conflict there, right? Because we've got ex-husbands, ex-wives, baby mamas, baby daddies who are, less than helpful or downright contradictory to helping you move forward in a healthy relationship. So we see a ton of that. Quite frankly, we see a lot of selfishness, right? It's like a lot of times I will have couples show up to the house, and I'm wondering why you're trying to be in a relationship when clearly you don't want one, right? Yeah, that's a lot of what we see. So it's a big part of it. But I think if I had to pick the most common issue, the most common 2 issues are communication and a lack of vulnerability. Those are the 2 things that get folks into trouble each and every time.
Yes, I think communication's a big one because I always say we all come from different families. We all come from different worldviews, and how do we kind of bridge that together? And I think that's such a good segue into asking you, what do you define as a healthy relationship, and maybe giving also our viewers, some tips and tools, because this is not about just, I believe, adult relationships, but this also bleeds into children and what they're role modeled, parenting.
Yeah.
I love how you brought up the topic of blended families, as I tend to work with a lot of blended families as well. And it goes back to what you're talking about is communication. So what do you see as a healthy relationship? Like some tips and tools on that.
No, that is a complicated question. It is. But I think as humans we overcomplicate it, right? Because we think it's this big thing that we've never seen done well, and a lot of us have trouble thinking that a healthy relationship is something we really deserve. So we really get down into the weeds when we really don't. So if you break it down to the simple parts, I keep it really simple. I'm from the country. I'm from the South. I'm from the country. I keep things real simple. Love is kind. So the first part of knowing that you're in a healthy relationship is realizing that it doesn't hurt. It just doesn't hurt, right? It helps you feel good. It doesn't help you feel bad, right? It doesn't hurt your body physically. It doesn't wound you emotionally. It doesn't send glancing blows at some of those unhealed childhood wounds that we're going to be forever working on, to show up more hold in our life. That's the first critical step to knowing this relationship is healthy. It simply doesn't hurt. And it breaks my heart that so many folks don't realize that one part.
Mm-hmm. Is that something, when you mentioned how people will walk in and you're just wondering, why are you even in this? Because it goes down to, like we were talking about earlier, ego and the lack of vulnerability and the ability to be vulnerable, right? So even parents being vulnerable, couples being vulnerable, and how parents are able to role model that vulnerability, like, oh, I just had a bad day, and role modeling that to their children so that their children have that vulnerability, and how that vulnerability is continued in their adult relationships. Because you mentioned vulnerability, and I would love to hear more about that, because I don't think people really understand what does that mean when I, as a female or male or female relationship, whatever relationship, that we can be vulnerable with one another. And it's not just romantic relationships. I really strongly believe in all relationships, friendships as well.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I think when I think about vulnerability in relationships, it really gets to the crux of what it means to love someone. And for me, when I think about what it means to love someone, to me, it means that I am choosing to give you all of me. And I'm going to show you all of me. And I'm going to allow you to only take the pieces, the parts of me that serve you, right? That's vulnerability. I'm going to show you all of it. The shiny, fancy bits, and then I'm going to show you the not so fancy, icky bits that maybe I don't like so much, right? And I'm going to trust that you're going to handle all of it with tenderness and sweetness and care, and you're not going to use any of it to try and hurt me, right? That's being vulnerable, right? Being vulnerable. And so if I'm modeling vulnerability as a man or somebody with masculine energy, I've come home, I've had a hard day, and my person asks me, "How was your day?" Fine. When clearly I'm not fine, right? Mm-hmm. Clearly I'm aggravated, and clearly I'm agitated. So vulnerability in that moment would say, "Hey, I don't really know how to get into it because I'm so upset about it." And what happened was, I got very, very disappointed because there was this big project I was working on, and it didn't work out well, and I'm not really sure how to make it. So I'm actually a little scared right now, right? I'm scared about what that means, and that's why I'm aggravated, right? That took 20 seconds of vulnerability, and now we can have a really cool adult conversation about that, as opposed to my partner now feeling shut off, closed down, and wondering why I'm not sharing and having to fill in the gaps with why they think I'm shutting down. And we never fill in the gaps with anything good, Doc. We always fill in the gaps with the bad stuff, right? Well, maybe they're cheating. Well, maybe they don't love me enough. Well, maybe this isn't working out. And none of that's happening. But if you take 20 seconds to really lean into some vulnerability, you can avoid all of the other miscommunications down the road.
Why do you think people don't share their vulnerabilities? What do you feel that blocks them? Because that's a hard thing to do, to be able to step back. You need some form of growth there, and being able to step back and do that. What do you think keeps people from that?
Yeah. I think the first thing that would help is knowing you're speaking to somebody who's holding a safe space for you, right? And we hear it overused so much, safe space, safe space. Well, what does that really mean? Well, safe space means that I can share things with you. I can tell you things, and I can trust that you're not going to use those things to help me feel ashamed, and you're not going to use those things later on to help manipulate me or right, or to hurt me in any way. That's a safe space. And I know in that space, when I'm sharing it with you, you're not going to judge me, right? You're not going to look at me as somehow less than, somehow smaller than, somehow flawed, somehow broken. You're just going to accept it, and also accept that there may be nothing I need you to do to help me fix it. And the only thing I really need you to do is just be there and listen, right? So that's how you set that up for vulnerability. You've got to let folks know it's okay to go there. And most of us are so busy that we don't take the time to be intentional about creating that space, that safe space, and holding it for our partners.
And I love what you said, because that really resonates a lot with teenagers, where there's that feeling of judgment. Like, even in session, I'll have clients say the same thing, where you're going to judge me, or I don't want to say, this is just the preconceived notions that I don't want to share X, Y, or Z with you, because there's going to be that sense of judgment, or you're going to think differently of me. And same thing in relationships, where if I show you weakness at this moment in sharing my vulnerability, then you're going to think differently, right? And that may take this relationship in another direction. Oftentimes I say, if somebody says that is, and that's not the person for you, right? Because it's all about building that strength and growing together. And I wanted to talk about growth, because growth is really important. And as you mentioned, even your parents, and being able to really stay in a long-term relationship. I feel like there's work, right? Relationships take work, they take time, but there are certain ingredients that really help that relationship to stay stable and continuous. And it's not all rainbows and unicorns and all amazing all the time. There's going to be challenges. And I always say, if there's no conflict, then you're not speaking. And I'm very big on that as well in terms of communication. But what are those ingredients, just more in general, that come to your mind in terms of building that relationship?
Yeah, so if we're talking about growth is tricky, right? Especially when you're talking about two people's growth in a relationship. And if you're not growing together, then you're growing apart. And that's just it, right? In med school, they taught us a very hard truth. Your body exists in two states. It is either growing or it is decaying. There is no plateau. There's just not. You're never staying the same. And thank goodness, because that's just not the way our bodies were designed, and that's not the way our relationships work. Either you are growing together and again is getting stronger, or you are growing apart and you don't realize it. And so what usually happens is, right, we think we picked this person, we found this perfect person to share our journey with. And I hate it when people say that, because your journey is yours. It's personal. Your journey is your journey. My journey is my journey. What we're choosing, right, that's about your trial and your tribulation and the things that you are conquering in your life as you are being the heroine of your own movie, right? And you meet a partner and you choose to share your journey with them while they are on their separate and unique journey. And that thing you guys are sharing together is now, we call that an adventure. That's something you share with each other. That's something you share with two people. And so nobody's ever growing at the same pace, and that's okay, but you've got to agree to tell your partner when that's happening. Hey, the thing that I used to do, I don't do that anymore, And let me tell you why. Okay, the thing I used to be into, or the thing we used to do that turned me on, doesn't turn me on anymore. I kind of outgrew that. I kind of grew away from that. Let me update you on the new thing. So growth is fantastic as long as you're being intentional about telling your person the areas where you've grown in and how that's happening for you and how that changes. And to do that, you've got to be unafraid that your growth means that they may not like you.
Yeah. And what happens when the latter occurs? We see that. It's pretty common in terms of the growth, right?
And that's okay, right? Because the thing isn't beautiful just because it lasts, right? Some things are stepping stones, and we don't put stepping stones in our bag. We put those stepping stones back in their place, and we move on for somebody else to use them, as stepping stones as well, right? And it sounds harsh, but guess what? We're all stepping stones in somebody else's journey. We just are, right? And so we've got to not take ourselves seriously, and we've got to understand that just because a thing came to an end doesn't make it any less beautiful, right? And we take away the good. We take away the lessons. We take away the blessings, and we learn the lessons, and we keep on moving.
I love that. And, that's such a perfect connection into the next question that we were talking about earlier, you and I, was how can a parent, caregiver talk about relationships, right, that their teens are going through? For example, teens falling into very toxic relationships or depression due to unhealthy bonds, as we call them. And I think this is where parents a lot of time are in the dark, or they don't know how to support their kids in these early teen relationships. That can really create a lot of chaos and trauma. And it could be good and bad, like you said. And I love how you said the stepping stone. But if only they could see it as a stepping stone in that moment, but they don't. And that's just because how the teenage brain is built, right? At everything, it's an all or nothing situation. What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's a couple of things, right? I don't envy our teens. In so many ways, they've got it so much harder than things were when I grew up. That's for sure, because they are being, it's almost like they're being constantly tested and stripped of different bits of their identity and their worth every day, because they're constantly being bombarded with what's popular and not necessarily what feels good or what is good or what is the right thing. It's just the popular thing. The popular thing breaks through. The popular thing gets the views. The popular thing gets the likes. The popular thing gets the attention, and that may not necessarily be the thing that feels good or certainly feels good to you, right? And so it's hard. So what I would tell parents is this, and it's a very tricky subject, and it's a very unpopular subject, but I would say this to parents: if you're talking to your teens about toxic relationships and you're not talking about pornography, you're doing it wrong. 75% of teens in this country report having watched pornography on their device by the time they're 17. And the average age of that first exposure is 12 years old. 12 years old, right? And more than half of these kids said they saw violent acts, they saw someone in pain, and they said it was stereotypical of Black, Latino, Asian people. And more than half of these kids said they felt guilty or ashamed after watching it. The troubling part is 1 out of 3 of these kids in the study said that only 1 out of 3 showed consent, right? So what are we teaching our kids about relationships and sexuality when they're being constantly bombarded when nobody adult is around to correct the information that they're receiving and talking about amongst each other? You've got to have that conversation. You've got to have that conversation about pornography, because it's such a present part in their lives now, because they have access to it on their devices, despite how much control you think you have over it. But the news isn't all bad, because at the same time, half of the kids in that same study said that, actually it helped provide them some helpful information and help them figure some things out, especially the kids who are in the LGBTQ community. And so, there's good and bad in all things, but as parents, we've got to have the courage to talk about it, right? So there are issues of boundaries that need to be talked about when it comes to healthy teen relationships. There's issues of consent. There are issues of safety that have to be talked about. And the truth is, as a parent today, you're going to need to talk about these things a lot sooner than you're going to want to. So don't let your discomfort as a parent turn into your child's problem, right? Go there. You've got to go there.
Okay, we have to go into a little break, and we will be right back with Dr. Ish Major. You are listening to KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220 and hometownstation.com. See you in a bit. Welcome back to the Dr. Regine Show on the Teen Hour. You are listening to KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220 and hometownstation.com. I have our guest, Dr. Ish Major, and we are here talking all about relationships for teens, parents, couples, anything relationship related. So excited to have you back on. Welcome back, Dr. Ish.
Hey, good to be back, Doc.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit earlier before the break about unhealthy bonds, and I think this really ties in well to my next question, which I know it's a lot. We could be here an hour just talking about this one. But what are some toxic relationship patterns to look out for, just to give our listeners an idea of what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, we could be here. You said an hour. We could be here for the next week talking about that one because there are a lot, right?
Yeah.
And some are obvious, and then some are sneaky. But again, I don't. In every part of us, there's a thinker and there's a knower, right? And sometimes we think ourselves into or out of situations when we really just know how it feels, right? And so we've got to go to that. So here's how we make it simple. Toxic relationship patterns. Guess what? If your person helps you feel bad, then there's some toxicity there, right? In any way. They shouldn't help you feel ashamed. They shouldn't help you feel embarrassed. They shouldn't help you feel humiliated. They should in no way help you feel less than or diminished or small when you're alone or whether you're in front of a group, right? They need to be the same. If any of those feelings are happening, then you've got to do a self-check and say, hey, this isn't the way it's supposed to feel. This isn't what I signed up for, right? I know this isn't how it's supposed to be. So that's one, right? If they're helping you feel bad in any of those ways. If you feel like you're constantly having to prove yourself to them, to prove your worth, to prove your value, just for them to honor you with their presence and their time and their attention and their affection, that's toxic. If you feel like you're responsible for how they feel, and so you watch what you say and you watch what you do and you never show up as your 100% authentic self just because you're worried about what they might think about it, that's toxic. If you don't feel like they trust you and you feel like the reason they don't trust you is all your fault, that's toxic, right? If they make you cry, that is toxic. And for me, if you don't feel cherished in that relationship, that is to say you don't feel special. You don't feel like you're the most important person in their world. If that's not happening, that is not your person. And that is not your person because there's some toxic stuff going on that you don't want to be a part of.
Well, that was really good. What about when you think about just even teens listening, friendships, toxic friendships with teens?
Same rules apply. Yeah. Does your friend embarrass you in front of your groups? Right? Do they make you feel small just so they can feel better about who they are? Are they sharing things with a group of folks that you shared with them in secret, and now you're feeling ashamed or somehow smaller and embarrassed or less than? Right? Same rules apply. If you feel like you've got to be extra just to show up and be a part of the crew and prove your worth to them, then that's not your crew. That's not your group. That's not your tribe, right? Those aren't your friends, right? If they don't help you feel connected and like you belong, then those aren't your people, right? And the more you try to fit in, the more you're going to feel like you're just sticking out like a sore thumb, right? And you've got to know that, right? And it's hard, right? So I say this, but when I think about our teens, right, what's one of the number one milestones of teens? We want to connect. We want to belong. We want to fit in. We want to be popular. And so it's hard walking that line, threading that needle as a kid. Hey, I want to be popular, and this is the cool kids group over here, and I can be a part of that group if I'm just this way, and that way. And that's okay to do that for a little while. But ultimately, you're going to figure out, hey, being that way isn't really who I am. So even though I'm fitting in and I'm popular, it's not really me who they see, right? And so at some point, you're going to outgrow that phase, and you're going to realize that the more important thing is being able to show up with a little authenticity. And so that whoever is choosing you, whether it's your group of friends, whether it's your partner, whether it's your family, they're choosing the real you. And that's when it really starts to feel good.
Mm-hmm. And you need quite a bit of, self-love there, right? In terms, just to be able to recognize those things. I think, what do you need to recognize these toxic relationships? So I think a lot of people know this, they feel it, they see it, they know it's not right because they're complaining about it, right? That's just human nature. The soul feels like this is not right, but they still tend to gravitate towards that. And so what are some tips too in helping teens love themselves better, right? I think it goes back to what you were saying, accommodating others, right? Being not accommodating others and showing up as your true self. But that's a hard one, I feel, for many teens. And that's when, I'm just thinking right now, because we haven't shared with our viewers that you work with, you own also some substance abuse facilities, and how that ties in. We see a lot of vaping. So I'm in a group and everyone's vaping, but I haven't really tried vaping. But I want to be cool, and I know it's not right, but I want to fit in, so I'm going to do that. And that's a common question parents have, like, how do I monitor that? How do I help my kid or explain to them that that's not a right choice when all they want is to fit in? And how you tie that in.
Yep. Yeah, it's like, right, everybody wants to be a part of the cool kids group. Yeah. Everyone wants to fit in. And the irony is the way to be the coolest kid is to not fit in at all, right? Mm-hmm. The coolest kid is the one who actually doesn't do what everybody else does. The coolest kid is the one who says, yeah, I see what y'all are doing. Got it. Great. Let me show you what I'm doing. And now everybody's like, oh, well, what is this revelation, right? What's so special going on over here? So it's hard. It's hard when that happens. And, it's because, again, our kids are at that age. They just want to be popular. They don't want to stand out. And they want to do things popular because popularity is the biggest. It's the biggest currency right now. If you're talking about TikTok, you're talking about Instagram, anything on social. And so it's so hard to stand out and to break through for who you are. That they're really up against a hard battle, and I do not envy them at all. But self-love, like you mentioned, Doc, it starts there. And at some point during everybody's life, yours, mine, everybody's, we have this thing or this series of things that happen that shame us so badly that we tell ourselves, I am never going to let anybody see that part of me ever again. And we start to shut parts of ourselves down, and that's when we all get diagnosed with never enough-itis, right? That is to say, who I am, I'm not sure if who I am is enough to be treated well. I'm not sure if who I am is enough to get all the love I'm going to need to be okay in this life, right? And so you've got to be very intentional about teaching yourself that who you are is enough. So you got to look in that mirror, literally look in the mirror, and you got to identify some things that you love about yourself. I don't care what it is, but you gotta make a list, right? Mm-hmm. It could be your hair, it could be your eyebrows, it could be your nose, it could be your mouth, it could be your smile, it could be your shoulders. And those are the things that we can all see, and now identify some of those things that only you can see, only your mom and dad or your people who are close to you can see, right? I love that I got a quirky sense of humor, right? I love that I can always tell the truth even when it's a little awkward. I love that, right? I love that I'm a nerd about Star Wars. I love that I'm, whatever those things are, what are those things about you that you think are cool? Not that you think somebody else would think is cool, but that you enjoy, right? I love the fact that I like to go for walks by a lake and just sit down and read a book. I love that about me, right? Embrace those things, because as you are meeting new people and being vulnerable with them, and sharing things about who you are, right? You're going to know what it feels like when you share something and they dig it and they get it and they love it because you've been getting it and digging it and loving it about yourself. So now that feeling is a known feeling to you. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I really like that. And, you mentioned the mirror example, and that reminded me of a technique I use, which is good tip for parents. I want you to look in the mirror and tell me who's that best version, who's the girl or boy that you want to be. Who is she? Describe her, describe him to me. And it's amazing how 9 out of 10, they know exactly who that person is. It's just tapping into that subconscious part of us to see what's the best version of yourself. So I want to, they'll say things like, I want to be more confident. I want to do more with my life, or whatever it is. And then you really tap into what confidence means to them. So they really know.
I love that.
I like the mirror analogy because it's stepping back.
And I love that you use the mirror in your exercises because when you're looking in the mirror all by yourself and yourself is staring back at you, it's really hard to lie to that person, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, such a good one. Hopefully, some people can use that. It's a really powerful exercise. So the other thing I wanted us to really dive into is addiction. And I was just really curious, and so great you have this experience. What is the best parenting advice you can give with a child who is going through addiction? Because quite often you'll hear parents asking, they don't really know how to have these conversations. Should I be compassionate about it? Should I, they tend to be very reactive. They really don't know. They just feel their hands are tied. They'll mention, should I give tough love? So what is your take on that?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because becoming a parent is probably the single most shaming thing you could choose to do to yourself because everybody's going to tell you how you're doing it wrong. And no matter how hard you try, it's hard to go to sleep at night as a parent and feel like, you did everything right. And when kids show up and they start experimenting with mood-altering substances, it's really hard to feel like you're getting it right. So what you want to do, the first thing you want to do as a parent is allow yourself some grace, right? Because parenting is hard. And raising a whole nother human is hard, right? Because they've got a whole set of feelings and experiences that are affecting their life that a lot of times you're just not there for and you just don't know about, right? And as it's supposed to be. So when I think about when kids come in to my practice and they're using, I just remember this mantra, symptoms are solutions, okay? My kid's using marijuana, okay, great. And I want it to, great, because it's going to cost, I got it. But your child, they are trying to solve a problem for themselves. And so the conversation I have with my teens who are using is, how is it you're trying to feel, right? I let the drug guide me to that answer. Right? If you're vaping, you're using marijuana, using one of those substances that kind of bring you down, that tells me you're anxious. So let's talk about what you're anxious about. Let's talk about what you're nervous about. Let's talk about what you're scared about. Well, this guy said something to me in class one day, and it really kind of scared me because of whatever that is. Let's work our way backwards. If you're using something that brings you up, right? If you're using a stimulant, you're using an amphetamine, you're buying Adderall from whoever you can find it, in the class that morning. Well, that tells me you're probably sad and you're just trying to feel better. So let's talk about what's bringing you down, right? Oh, well, this person I wanted to go out with, they didn't like me back, and wow, or I put this, I'm an artist and I put this thing out there and nobody liked it, and I just feel a little worthless. So let's talk about that. We'll get to the drug later, right? The drug is not my top priority. My top priority is the way you think the drug is going to help you feel. And let me show you a way. Let me draw you a roadmap how to get that feeling without the illicit substance. Now we can start doing some work, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's so true. But a lot of times I feel that's so great for us as practitioners, but for parents, I feel they feel so stuck. Like what is one tool that we can share with parents that they can take away on approaching finding out that their kid is using whatever substance it is before they even hopefully get in to receive help, whether it's a treatment center or it's individual therapy.
Yeah.
What's one thing you could tell parents?
I think, not to cut you off, Doc, but I think our theme for this talk today is going to be mirrors, right?
Yes.
One tool that I love to help parents use is mirroring, right? Hey, you know your child better than anybody else on the planet. You know when they're not feeling good. You know when they're keeping stuff from you. You know when they're feeling anxious. You know when they're looking sad. A lot of times, our kids or ourselves, we don't know. So as a parent, use this tool. Mirror what you're seeing, right? Say, hey, I'm not sure what's happening right here, but you're looking tense. You're looking stressed out today. What's going on? Did something happen? And a lot of times it's like, oh, right? Because remember, they're kids. They're teenagers. Nothing a teen wants more than to be seen and recognized, right? To have that status. So, oh, you see me. You see I'm looking sad today. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Actually, I am. And just with that and saying, hey, if you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen. And you don't force the conversation, and then you leave it right there, right? And you let them fill the space, right? You've just created a safe space for them to tell you a little bit about what's going on in their life. And you're not going to judge, right? And you're not going to shame. And you're not going to forbid, right? You can forbid them from vaping all day long. It's not going to work, right? But what you really want to do is talk about the reason why they're doing it. Well, because everybody else is doing it, and I want to fit in with everybody else because when I'm on my own, I don't feel so great. I don't feel so confident. I don't feel so awkward. Well, let's talk about what helps you feel awkward about yourself. Is it your body? Is it the way you look? Is it, right? The way your voice sounds? Look, let's talk about these things, right? It's just, as a parent, you're always looking for the way in to have a deeper conversation, and mirroring what you're seeing them show you is a great way to start that.
Yes, and it goes back to really giving them that control is what I'm hearing, and mirroring back, well, what role do you need me to play today? Do you want me to listen or give you feedback? What is it that you need from me to engage in that conversation? And I found that to be really impactful. I love that. This is all really good stuff. What are you seeing as the main drug of use in teens today?
Well, I think it's always the stuff that's easiest to get, right? And so the easiest thing to get is marijuana now, obviously. The second easiest thing to get is Adderall, right? And it gets passed around. It's currency. It's like soap in a prison. It's currency, right? Those are the easiest things, and it makes sense because what are the top two things that our kids are these days? Well, they're sad and they're worried and they're anxious, right? Because oh, why? Well, because their parents are sad and our parents are anxious, because we are. As a society, we just are, right? We're living in very unsure times. We're living in very tribal times where folks are resolving conflict well, and folks are very closed off, and folks are very judgmental, and that's not the way they were taught it was supposed to be, and so that kind of makes us sad. And what is it we're really looking forward to? So those are the things I'm seeing the most. Now, the dangerous part, Doc, is post-COVID, fentanyl has been introduced into the drug supply, right? Everything, not just the heroin, not just the pressed pills, the Lortab, the Percocet. And when I say pressed pills, I mean pills that a drug dealer made, not pills that came from a pharmacy, pills they made up in a press, and they're using fentanyl now because they happen to extend and what we call cut the drug supply. And they didn't stop there. It is in marijuana. It is in any pressed pill. If you're buying pressed Adderall, pressed Lortab, pressed Percocet, pressed Oxy or Roxycontin, it is in that. If you're buying heroin, it is in that. If you're buying cocaine, it is in that, right? Everything is there. And what people don't realize is if you can imagine what 10 grains of salt or 10 grains of sand look like in your mind, and think about how much space that would take on your fingernail, that's the amount of fentanyl that will have you overdosed and dying.
And this
in
is
30 minutes.
Yes, and we're seeing a lot of that. We have to go into another break. We'll be right back. You are listening to KHTS 98.1 AM, 1220, and hometownstation.com. We will be right back with Dr. Ish Major talking all about relationships. This is the Regine Show on the Teen Hour. Welcome back to the Dr. Regine Show on the Teen Hour. You are listening to KHTS FM 98.1 AM, 1220, and hometownstation.com. I have our guest, Dr. Ish Major. We have been talking about many things today: relationships, parenting, addiction, and I wish we had more time because there's so much to unpack here. But for the rest of the 5 minutes we have today, we really wanted to continue with you, Dr. Major. You have so much amazing information to share with our listeners. Thank you. So let's dive right in. For the time we have left, what advice can you give to parents? Let's shift gears a little bit. Who are struggling with their children on how to keep their own relationship healthy. So I'm thinking also of high conflict situations. Anything that comes to your mind in terms of just some tips for couples, parents. Caregivers, even grandparents who are caregivers, to keep that relationship healthy, because we tend to forget ourselves in our relationships a lot of times and focus so much. I mean, it could be also focusing on a sick child. It could be focusing on other things, and we forget the us in the relationship.
Yeah, you get lost, right?
You get lost.
Who we are gets lost somewhere along the way. Yeah. So, I'm a car guy. Matter of fact, I'm a car super freak. And I can remember a time to where we used to have this thing where we would say, you have to check up, you have to do an oil change every 3,000 miles. Now, obviously, now that's no longer the case. It's every 50,000, 100,000. But back in the day, we would say every 3,000 miles, you got to give your car a checkup. So if I take that a rule and I apply it to couples and say every 3,000 minutes, I want you to do a checkup. I want you to change the oil. I want you to change the air filter. I want to make sure that there's, air in the tires. That comes out, Doc, to about every 2.5 to 3 days.
Oh, wow.
No more than every 2.5 to 3 days, I need you and your partner to sit down, facing each other, either holding each other's hands or have some part of your body, knee to knee, or holding your hand, devices down, kids in the room on their iPad doing homework, whatever it is they're doing in there, none of your business, for the next 30 minutes, and you're just going to check in and see how they're doing. And you're going to ask the question, hey, how are you doing? Am I still your person? That's a great question, because it's hard to lie to that question because it's so honest, right? Mm-hmm. Am I still your person? Are we still each other's person? And then the critical part of this is allowing space for the answer. You ask the question, and then for the next 18 seconds, you say nothing. Silence. And you give them time to fill the space with an honest answer full of integrity and courage to tell you how they're doing and therefore how we are doing. Because what happens is we roll over that space because maybe we don't want to hear it. Maybe we know we haven't done a great job. Maybe we are bracing for them to blame us for that thing that I forgot. I forgot to pick up the kids a couple of days ago. I'm sorry about that. I don't want to hear about it. So I don't want to give you the space to talk about it. No. Sit down. No devices. No TV. No children. No distractions. Look at your person in the eye and ask them, am I still your person? And then count to 18 before you say anything, so you give them time to answer. And you will be amazed at what comes out of their mouth next.
Wow, that's very powerful. I love that number, 18. Let's remember 18 seconds.
18. It's magical. This is my 18-second rule. It is magical. Because, right, and especially as Americans, we're uncomfortable with those long, pregnant pauses, with those awkward silences. And we will do anything to fill that space and not have to feel it. And it sounds like a short amount of time, but 18 seconds is an eternity.
That's amazing.
You're waiting for somebody, right?
I love that. Oh, thank you. Number. Thank you so much, Dr. Ish, for coming on. You were amazing. Such an honor to have you. I really
Thanks for having me.
Hope to next time. So you have been listening. Thank you so much for listening to KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220 and hometownstation.com. I am your host, Dr. Regine, and I will see you soon.